What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Bryce. Today I'm going to be in chapter 37 of the Parker Inheritance. Let's begin. Chapter 37. Candace didn't know what had happened to change Miss Jones's mind, but when Brandon called on Tuesday morning and said that he was off punishment, she didn't question him about it. She also didn't ask him what he had done to get grounded in the first place. He didn't ask her if she was excited about going back home. They just got together and worked on the mystery of James Parker. By that afternoon, they had come to one major conclusion. So what? So what if Reggie Bradley was really James Parker? It didn't get them any closer to finding his fortune. Do you think he was happy? Brandon asked. James or Reggie or whoever he was. I wonder if he liked being someone else. Well, he was really rich, but was he happy? Candace considered this question, then shook her head. If he was happy, he would have never sent that letter. If he was happy, he would have ended up with Siobhan somehow. Do all the people end up together in your mom's books? He asked. Yeah, but she writes romances. It's one of her publisher's rules. When this was all done, and Candace had told her mother about everything, she hoped her mom would somehow turn it into a book. Candace. He looked directly at her. Face it, we're stuck. It's time to contact the other people who got a letter. But Brandon, last week your mom said that y'all could be home as soon as this weekend. He said. That's still true? Maybe. Candace pinched her palm. She hadn't started packing, but her mom had. We're running out of time, he said quietly. Don't you want to find the money? Candace squeezed the palm even harder, then gave Brandon a small nod. Brandon spun around and opened a photo of the letter. He'd taken it last Friday, so they both have a copy. Before Mom grounded me, I was able to piece together the names of the people who received a letter like your grandmother's. I could only find contact information for one of them. He opened another document. William Maynard. He was chairman of the school board when your grandmother was city manager. Candace frowned. William Maynard? That sounds familiar. It should. He picked up a Wallace yearbook and flipped to the picture of the tennis team. He was a member of the team in 1957, he said. In 1956, too. Maybe he was even right there that night. Candace stared at the photo. William stood next to Glenn Allen. She flipped to a senior photo. He sported a mop of black hair. His eyeglasses looked too small for his face. Well, what do you think? Brandon asked. She closed the yearbook. How do we know if we can trust him? If he was there, maybe he was also one of the men who beat up Coach Washington and Reggie Bradley. Maybe he's as racist as Marion Allen. I know, but I think we have to take the chance. He looked out the window, and Candace followed his gaze. She wondered if he had noticed Milo riding by a few moments before. Okay, he asked. Candace took a deep breath. Okay. Brandon had found all of William Maynard's contact information online, but instead of calling, they decided to send him an email, a newly created anonymous email account. It took them a full hour to write and rewrite the message. Hello, this is what the message says. Hello, we would like to discuss a letter concerning a lost fortune and the Allen's family role in driving Enoch Washington and his family from Lambert. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Candace hadn't wanted to add the part about the Allens and the Washingtons, but Brandon had been adamant. He wanted to get William Maynard's attention. It worked. Less than 5 minutes later, Brandon's computer dinged. They crowded around the screen. Who is this? And what letter are you referring to? While they were figuring out how to respond, another email popped into their inbox. William Maynard wanted to call him now. He sent a phone number. So now what? Brandon asked. I don't really want him to have our phone number. Do you want to call him From your mom's cell phone? No way. Maybe we can do some type of video chat. Brandon typed in a return message. Are you available for a video chat? William Maynard's replied. Yes, and bring the letter. The man on the screen looked well put together. His hair, now stark white, sat high on his head. He wore a plain wedding band on his ring finger. Candace always noticed this now, and his tie was pulled loosely to his neck. You two are not who I expected, he said. Where did you find the letter? With my grandmother's belongings, Candace said. She held up the letter to the screen. It was in the attic. Your Abigail Call was a granddaughter, huh? He smiled, and it seemed real. She sure was in love with you. Always talked about you. Say you were the smartest baby ever created. You knew her well, Candace asked. Well enough. I was chairman of the school board for about 20 years, both before and during your grandmother's time as city manager. We worked on the sound of squealing kids came through the video, cutting them off. Sorry about that. I got my grants for the summer. He shifted in his seat. As I'm sure you're aware, 5 of us received letters. The mayor asked us all to destroy them. Even the editor of Lambert Trader? Brandon asked. William Maynard nodded. The mayor was a very powerful man with a lot of influence. He played it with the end of his tie. I'm real sorry about what happened to Abigail. If she had just thrown that letter away and forgot all that nonsense. It's not nonsense, Candace said. We can prove it, Brandon asked. We know who sent the letter. So do I, Reggie Bradley or James Parker, or whatever he was calling himself. Candace stared at the screen. You knew? Not at first. Your grandmother was the one who figured out Parker was tied to the donations around the city. She told us about her research, hoping to get out of our support. When we refused, she dug up the courts at Vickers Park. I finally looked them up online after that. One glance at the photo and I knew it was him. You were there, weren't you? Brandon said. You were at the game. William Maynard sighed. Those boys beat us fair and square, beat us like we never seen a tennis racket before, much less pick a tennis racket up. It's crazy. What about after? Brandon asked. From the look on his face, Candace could tell William Maynard knew what Brandon was talking about. I had no part in those attacks, he said, but I knew what Marion and Glenn were going to do. He held up his hands. Look, they were just trying to make a point. They weren't really trying to hurt nobody. You have to understand. In the 50s, they beat them up and drove them out of town, Brandon said. How can you justify that? They weren't the only ones hurt, William said. Marion Allen lost an eye. He lost an eye. That's crazy. He only lost an eye because he attacked 2 innocent people. Makes sense. Brandon exploded back. Candace had never heard him so upset before. It was a little scary. I'm not excusing it. I'm just trying to explain what happened. He reached for a glass of water. Me and Penelope supported Marion for 10 years after his father disowned him. Marion was a mess right up until he died. But what can I say? His sister loved him. His sister? Candace looked back at the wedding ring on William Maynard's hand. You married an Allen? She was pretty sure. She sneered as she asked the question. Don't you dare talk about the dead like that, he said. She wasn't like the others. Neither of us were. Brandon crossed his arms. Tell that to Enoch Washington and Reggie Bradley. Look, there's not a day that goes by where I don't think about what those boys did to Dub and Reggie. What I should have done. How I should have stopped them, said something. Maynard paused to take a drink of water. Me and Penelope spent the rest of our lives making up for it. You know, if it wasn't for me, Perkins would have been shut down a long time ago, and all the students would have been sent to Wallace. I was the one who convinced the rest of the board to combine both schools. It was fair that way, and I've always been a supporter of the black community. Shoot, I even become a registered Democrat. He laughed, but stopped after a few moments when they didn't join in. The letters say Parker's money would be used to help Lambert. Candace said, didn't you want to do that, get the money for the city? Penelope talked to her brother. He lived up in Seattle, he said. Like the rest of us, they felt a scandal would further divide the city. They offered to make a sizable donation in order to preserve the peace. Was the donation as big as what Parker promised in the letter? Brennan asked. Was it $40 million? He coughed. No, of course not, but was it even as big as what Parker had already donated to the school, the church, and the library? Brennan added. Instead of replying, William Maynard finished the rest of his water. You were scared, Brennan continued. You didn't want people to know what you did, who you really were. Look here, son, he said. James Parker, Reggie Bradley, he wasn't no saint. He was just about drove Penelope's company to bankruptcy. He almost destroyed the economic backbone of the city. If he really wanted to help Lambert, he could have made a donation and foregone all the trickery. You destroyed his life, Brandon yelled. From where I'm sitting, he ended up doing just fine. He was rich, powerful, famous. What more could he want? His old life, Brandon said. His identity. He had to give up who he was. Now his hands were trembling. You kids will never understand, he said. Sorry to be curt, but this conversation is over. I wanted to see who you were and what you knew. You're going to pretend none of this happened. You're going to pretend none of this happened? Candace asked. 1957 was a long time ago. No one cares. No one cares. Jesus. And pretty soon, and no one will be alive who even remembers. He reached toward the keyboard. Some things should remain in the past. We'll tell someone, Brandon said. We'll go to the police. And I'm sure they'll believe you. How old are you? 10, 11? He waved at the screen. Have a good afternoon. And please do not contact me again. Please do not contact me again. It's nothing personal. But I have my wife and my family's reputation to protect. At the end of the day, all you have is your name. The screen went blank. Neither of them spoke for a few minutes. Candace was playing catch-up with everything Maynard had said. Brennan just stared at the dark screen. He's a racist coward, Brennan finally said. A bully. It's not fair. He doesn't care about the city. All he wants to do is protect his name. Candace hesitated, then placed her hand on his back. It's okay. We don't need him. Aren't you mad? He asked. Of course I am, she said. I'm still trying to sort through everything in my head, trying to figure out what to do next. Sniffing, Brennan wiped his nose with the back of his hand. He's right. No one will never believe us. We can prove that James Parker is Reggie Bradley. So what? Who even care? He stood up quickly, tipping over his chair. That was bars. We should go back to the library. I need more sports books. We have to figure out the rest of the code. Brennan, we can wait. I saw Milo. No, we can't. You're leaving, remember? Returning to your fancy life in Atlanta. Candace slowly stood. Don't be mad at me. I didn't ask to go back home. But you want to go, right? She didn't know how to respond, so she kept her mouth shut. Come on, he said, already leaving the room. I'll meet you out front. Candace returned home after she used the bathroom and told her mom where she was going. She pulled her bike from the shed and wheeled it to the front of the house. Across the street, Milo and 3 of his friends had surrounded Brandon. The boys were yelling at him while Brandon stood still, his arms crossed against his chest. Candace dropped her bike and ran over. What's going on? Oh, Brandon, here comes your girlfriend, Milo said. Or she the boy and you're the girl. Ooh, burn. Shut up. Then Brandon looked at Candace. Go home. I can handle this. Just leave them alone. Candace said, if she stuck around, maybe they wouldn't beat him up. Oh, she is the boy, isn't she? Milo grinned. Then he called Brandon one of the dirty, horrible, vile names that had been scrawled in the vandalized yearbook. The other boys laughed. Brandon narrowed his gaze on Milo, knuckled his hands, stood taller. Speaking of girlfriends, is Deacon Hawk still seeing your mom? Does your dad still go to therapy because of it? Everyone fell silent. Shut up, Milo said. His voice sounded small, shrill. Is that what your dad said to your mom when she caught them together? Brandon continued. Do you think it's possible you're actually Deacon Hawk's son? At least my parents are still together, Milo said. I know, Brandon said. Some women are too weak to live on their own. Candace didn't. That's messed up. Candace didn't know who was talking, but it wasn't her, Brandon. It was someone too cruel and cold to be her friend. Milo cocked back his arm like it was in slow motion. Brennan easily leaned away from the wild swing, and then Milo was off balance. Brennan crushed his fist into Milo's stomach. "Brennan, no!" Candace yelled. Brennan turned to Candace. He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Because he was looking at her, he didn't see Milo swing until it was too late. Milo's fist exploded against Brennan's face. He fell, his arms billowing out. His back and head bounced against the sidewalk with a loud crack. "Brennan!" Candace yelled, pushing past the boys. He wasn't moving. Oh God, he wasn't moving. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Please be okay." Brennan's body had flayed out on the sidewalk. His eyes were closed and his cheek was already beginning to turn puffy from where Milo had hit him. 1, 2, 1,000 seconds later, Brennan groaned. Candace decided this was a good thing. She looked up. Milo and one of the boys had taken off down the street, their bikes wobbling underneath them. The other two stood nervously nearby. "Go get my mom," she said to them. When they didn't move, she screamed, "Go, now!" The boys dropped their bikes and ran to her house. And that was chapter 37. So tomorrow I'll be reading chapter 38. And that's about it. Peace out.